You've probably clicked this video wondering what could possibly be the most fun car that you can drive to the track and on a splendid winding road, whilst being able to take all the week's groceries. Well, I promise you, this ain't your typical best hot hatches or best daily drivers you can buy today video. Front wheel drive is great, with the lift-off oversteer that you can generate in these types of cars being pretty entertaining, whilst with all-wheel drive you can hold some pretty nasty power slides. But I'll pose you a question instead. Imagine a more lightweight hatchback that you can hold drifts in. But wait a second, why not just get one of those rear-wheel drive sedans like a brand new M3? Well, here's the thing. A hatchback allows you to stack lots of things on top of each other in your car boot, which you can't really do in a sedan. Sedans are usually longer as well, meaning they also have a longer wheelbase, which also adds weight, making the car feel less agile and light on its feet. So, with this niche genre of rear-wheel drive hot hatches, you've now taken all the ingredients of a great handling, lightweight hot hatch and added a bit of sideways fun, which you should know is the best fun. Who doesn't love oversteer? As understeer haters are intuitive, we do. Instead of all the front wheel drive hatches we see today, lots of car companies in the 70s were making rear wheel drive hatchbacks, as they hadn't quite found out yet that front wheel drive will be much cheaper to package and manufacture overall. Whilst Toyota were known for the Starlet and Publicus being rear wheel drive, they didn't have quite the sporty demeanour that you would expect from a hot hatch. So what is exactly a hot hatch? Basically, it is a high performance trim of your traditional hatchback. So, for the sake of this video, as we are covering the most fun type of practical cars, let's list and explore together the rather fleeting but fascinating history of the rear wheel drive hot hatch. Lotus, the kings of lightweight fun. Some of the greatest hits in driving history, the Elan, the Exige, and recently the Emira, exude exuberance from a brand richly esteemed in all types of motorsport. But did you know, they actually made a car which you can fit most of the Costco in? That's not an EV. Introducing the Talbot Sunbeam Lotus, a homologation special commissioned by Chrysler as a road-going rear-wheel drive rally car. In road trim it produced via a 2,172cc engine, quite a tasty 150 horsepower at 5,750 RPM and 203 Nm of torque at 4,500 RPM, which is quite a lot for that time. In railing trim, this became a beefy 250 horsepower. Unveiled at the Geneva Motor Show in April 1979, this glorious machine was met with great critical acclaim. Just look how damn beautiful this thing is. I might have a suspicion the lads at Chrysler beforehand were jealous of how timeless the lads at VW made the GTI look in the 70s, but it's different enough with rear-wheel drive. So much for someone copying your code by changing the variable names, right? For what it was designed for, the World Rally Championship, it was quite the killer. In 1980, Henry Toivonen won the 29th Lombard RAC Rally. But the biggest fish they fried? In 1981, Talbot won the WRC Makes Championship and what was to be their last success. Now let's pay a visit to the land of freedom. Within there lies a strange combo. A rear-wheel drive Chevy hatchback? Yes, Chevrolet seriously did make a rear-wheel drive hatchback from 1976 to 1987 in the Chevette. It was so successful that it sold over 2.8 million units over 12 years. That's a lot of cars. But what's the hot hatch version of this? Well, the lads at Vauxhall decided to do what Chevy couldn't and make a far more powerful trim known as the Chevette 2300 HS. Fitting a 2.3 litre 4-cylinder engine, they used a 16-valve cylinder head and two Stromberg carburetors to develop 135 horsepower at 5,500 RPM and 182 Nm of torque at 4,500 RPM. The suspension and rear axle was taken from the Opel Kadett CGT/E and the gearbox was a Getrag 5-speed manual. Chevrolet Vega alloy wheels were used, as well as a newly developed glass reinforced plastic air dam. Whilst it already possessed great handling and speed, winning the British Open Rally Drivers' Championship in 1979 and then the Manufacturers' Championship in 1981, Vauxhall decided to take it a step further and develop an even more rapid Chevette in the HSR, upgrading it with even more performance mods and 160 horsepower. Wow, that was anticlimactic. Only 160 horsepower. That's laughable, right? Well, it also helps that this thing weighs like under a ton, so it will feel plenty fun in the corners. The Rising Sun's poster boy. Tofu tourer by day, 2-game master by night. This is the Toyota AE86 Sprinter Treno. Heavily popularized in the iconic Initial D anime, it was, and still is, one of the most popular JDM modding platforms for a few reasons. These cars were light, weighing at 970 kilos, affordable, were high revving at 7800 RPM with a twin cam engine that had an oil cooler and a near 50-50 front rear rate balance. The AE86 used a naturally aspirated 4A GE inline-4 engine, a dual overhead cam 4-valve per-cylinder motor which had a wide range of applications not limited to the first generation MR2, and in the AE86 it produced 118 horsepower at 6600 RPM and 149 Nm of torque at 5200 RPM instead of 4, though it was later downrated to 118 horsepower and 142 Nm in an output. Basically, this car was extremely over-engineered. For crying out loud, this was a rear-wheel drive Corolla that weighed like a feather, had ventilated disc brakes, independent front suspension, a 4-link life axle with coil springs for the rear, as well as front and rear stabilizer bars, and most importantly, a limited slip differential. This doesn't get more hot-hatched than this, people. Launched in Japanese showrooms in May 1983, it also had, and still has, quite an esteemed motorsport history, with heavy use in Group A touring car races, as well as professional drifting even today. But this thing was so overpowered that it won the European Touring Car Championship in 1986 with a 150 horsepower 4A GEU engine against a BMW M6, a car that made almost twice its power at a whopping 282 horsepower. Yes, that's right, Toyota, the staple of the common man, outdid the ultimate driving machine. Truly a David and Goliath tale for the ages. Sierra Leone. Frank Ocean's Channel Orange. What a masterpiece. For copyright reasons, I can't play this magnificent song. But you know what Ford decided to do in 1987 with their Sierra? Channel in some motorsport heritage by releasing the Sierra Cosworth RS500. Just look at this thing, absolutely glistening in the sun. Yeah, I get what you mean, it doesn't look like what a hatchback usually looks like. But in my opinion, it's the best type of hatchback. This and new Type Rs have something that I like very much in common. A lovely liftback design. Look at that boot space. Absolutely enormous, and after I read out this car's features, you'll be struck back so smoothly that you'll think this might be the most all-rounded fun rear-wheel drive hot hatch ever. The RS500 has an upgraded inline-4 engine producing 222 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 277 Nm of torque at 4,500 RPM. A larger Garrett AI Research T04 turbocharger, a larger air intercooler, an upgraded oil and cooling system and fuel pump, and aerodynamic upgrades to improve stability, with the rear tailgate having a lower spoiler and an upper whale tail, as well as a redesigned front bumper and spoiler. This car was so powerful for the Sierra's dimension that BorgWarner had to set up an entirely new production line just for the RS500 gearboxes. And in motorsports, what a machine! We've already talked about how successful the other cars in this video have been, but this? I might as well just roll a bunch of credits listing all of them. Here's the list. Absolutely unbelievable, eh? This car was just like Thierry Henry in the Champions League, both with their unstoppable blend of agility, balance, and power in their prime. Earlier in the video, we mentioned Toyota Humble, the ultimate driving machine. But here's the thing, why were they called the ultimate driving machine? That's because Bavaria's very best have made so many iconic rear-wheel drive cars already, such as the 2002 Turbo, M1, and the cover icon of Frank Ocean's first foray into the music industry, the E30 M3. Roughly after the turn of the millennium in 2001, BMW released a hot hatch that was called a Z3 Ebb Coupe. Strange, I know, but it was called Clown Shoe for a reason, so it must be a hot hatch in my eyes anyway, even though it has only 2 seats. Looks close enough. Pretty much, it was the hatch version of the highly lauded E46 M3, just with less oomph. Let's explain. The naturally aspirated S54 engine, which was the euphoric highlight of the E46, was detuned to 321 horsepower at 7400 RPM and 350 Nm of torque at 3275 RPM. Despite a more optimal flowing exhaust, it had used a standard ZF Type-C 5-speed manual, despite the chassis being built with the necessary mounting ports for the M3's Getrag S6S 420G 6-speed transmission. However, it also came with McPherson struts in the front and semi-trailing arms in the rear, as well as an LSD with a maximum locking of 25%. From here on out, this is where we start to see the decline of this rather quite lovely niche of rear-wheel drive hot hatches, as this car and the following cars had little to zero motorsport history, unlike the 20th century greats we've mentioned earlier in this video. Let's now take a trip down southern Europe to France. Out of all the hot hatches in the list, this Clio V6 RS is the strangest and goes against the mark of practical cars. Let's examine why. Firstly, this thing is mid-engine. Yep, you heard me right, mid-engine. That means that there are only 2 seats in this car, and very limited combined practicality in the rear boot and the front boot, which could be passable for a week's groceries. Let's skip to the Phase 2 version in 2003, which had the same 2.9 naturally aspirated V6 engine as the previous gen. By this point, it had become the most powerful serially produced hot hatch in the world, making 252 horsepower at 7,150 RPM and 300 Nm of torque at 4,650 RPM, paired to a wondrous 6-speed manual gearbox. Nowadays, these cars are insanely rare collector's items, commanding well over 6 figures in Australia. Back to Bavaria we go, because this car right here has all the ingredients of a hot hatch, even though its styling says anything but. This is the heavily underrated BMW E87 130i hatch, released in 2006, which uses a naturally aspirated straight 6 N52 engine, making a monstrous 261 horsepower at 6,600 RPM and 315 Nm of torque at 2,750 RPM, whilst only weighing 1,375 kilos in the 6-speed manual and 1,410 kilos in the 6-speed Steptronic Sport automatic trim. Even crazier, until mid-2007, this car also came with hydraulic steering, meaning you were more connected to the car compared to today's electronic racks. Whilst the entirety of the 1 Series up later into the F prefix cars when they introduced X-Drive was rear-wheel drive, this was undoubtedly the highlight of the range as it made even more power than the Clio V6 did. And it wasn't even an branded car. Until the madmen at Retech Customs decided to put an entire drivetrain and 4-litre V8 S65 engine, making a whopping 414 horsepower at 8,250 RPM and 400 Nm at 3,900 RPM from the E92 M3, as well as a ZF DCT into this little 130i. I'll have a link in the description to the build series, but come on now, V8 rear-wheel drive hot hatch doesn't get much better than this. At the turn of the decade, this 130i, unfortunately, was the swan song of naturally aspirated straight 6 motors for BMW in the little 1 Series hatch. In came instead the introduction of the turbo straight 6, with the M135i using the famed N55 engine, making 315 horsepower at 5800 to 6400 RPM and 450 Nm of torque at 1300 to 4500 RPM, whilst the M140i used the mythical B58 engine, making 335 horsepower at 5500 RPM and a whopping 500 Nm of torque at 1520 to 40,500 RPM. Whilst these 2 hot hatches gained the M mark and are still rightfully popular for being wickedly fun all-rounders, with the M140i basically the last internal combustion engine rear-wheel drive hot hatch, it only possessed a paucity of that sheer raw driving experience that had defined the M nameplate for decades. It didn't quite have that high revving naturally aspirated experience and the famous hydraulic steering that the 130i did, with there being concessions from the press regarding the lack of feel from the electric steering in both cars. But before we get into possibly the only new rear-wheel drive hot hatches you can buy, which unfortunately don't have engines, let's pay a visit to the quaint little village of Gaydon in Warwickshire, the home of Aston Martin. Wait, hold on. Aston Martin actually made a hot hatch? Well, it was only for one person. But it wasn't just any hot hatch. It was even more bonkers than the X65 swapped 130i we talked about earlier. This was an Aston Martin Signet V8, which used the AMG M17 4.7 litre engine, transmission, suspension, brakes and wheels from an Aston Martin Vantage S. Yeah, you heard that right. These guys in 2011 took a bloody supercar and fitted the best of it into what was basically a Toyota IQ. This car made 430 horsepower at 7300 RPM and 400 Nm of torque at 5000 RPM, with a 0 to 100 km of 4.2 seconds and a top speed of 274 km an hour, whilst weighing 1,375 kilos compared to the Vantage S's plump 1,610 kilos. This thing lost so much weight, you must have thought it took Ozempic or something. Now, say you only wanted a petrol rear-wheel drive hot hatch, and you wanted a brand new, fresh from the showroom floors. Here's a catch-22. You'd have to either accept dipping your toes into the used market to get one, or settle for an electric rear-wheel drive hot hatch, which is exactly what these two cars are. Based on the same MAB platform as each other, this is the Cupra-born e-Boost and the Volkswagen ID.3 GTX. Whilst the Born boasts a decent power output of 228 horsepower and 310 Nm of torque, and a 0 to 100 of 7 seconds flat, it doesn't quite have the performance of the soon-to-be released ID.3 GTX, boasting 282 horsepower and 545 Nm in its base trim, and 322 horsepower and 545 Nm in its performance trim, with both drawing current from an 84 kWh lithium-ion battery pack. The GTX performance's 0 to 100 time? 5.6 seconds. Anticlimactic, isn't it? Considering the DCT in the i30N can get into the low 5s. Well, it doesn't help that the GTX performance weighs a whopping 2 tons. The unfortunate pattern that we see here is that, as time flies, less of these rear-wheel drive hot hatches are being made. Why is that? Well, if you look at almost every hatchback sold today, all of them are front-wheel drive. As we mentioned earlier in the video, it's just much easier and cheaper overall for car brands to make front-wheel drive cars, and developing a new rear-wheel drive platform for a front-wheel drive hatchback in particular will be quite expensive and time-consuming, which, especially in a time of economic frailty, which has been exacerbated by COVID-19, is not ideal. Let's take an example, even though it's not really rear-wheel drive. In an effort to boost Toyota's brand image for not being just a boring commuter car company, CEO Akio Toyoda decided to sign off in the GR Yaris, and this required developing an entirely new and bespoke chassis, as well as an all-wheel drive homologation special, which is basically a road-going rally car. In Toyota's famed Motomachi factory, where the legendary LFA was built, it actually takes 10 times longer to build a GR Yaris than your typical run-of-the-mill Yaris, as they hand-build these as well. Basically, Toyota ended up losing money from this car, despite selling tens and thousands of these cars. But the difference here is, in the modern era, the hard reality is that it doesn't make sense for a car company to spend millions in R&D making an entirely new rear-wheel drive platform for a hatchback to sell to the enthusiast car market, which honestly is a very small percentage of the current car market as a whole. Even BMW, the kings of the rear-wheel drive hatch, have also now shifted into the front-wheel drive hot hatch market with their 128 Ti. So that's the rear-wheel drive hot hatch for you. A perfect blend of practicality, lightness, and sideways fun. If you think we missed any other rear-wheel drive hot hatches, let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, we'd appreciate it if you can give us a cheeky follow on YouTube and Instagram. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in a bit.